Hello, everybody. So I just wanted to create this discussion and point a couple of things out in terms of some of the things that we've been talking about in the last week or so, more specifically towards the issues of school closure and the recent amendment that was voted on February 8th, which was essentially on Tuesday. I just wanted to point a couple of things out. Okay, so let's begin. I'm going to try to do this as fast as I can. So, all right, so the parameters and narrative being shared to the news channels are that, this is the Wall Street Journal, essentially letting us know that most of the school slated closures are elementary campuses, fewer than 300 students. And there's essentially this idea of there's a significant drop in enrollment, right? You can see here that they're saying that there's 35% decline in enrollment over the past decade in this essential Wall Street Journal information, right? So now on February 8th, there was a proposed amendment and they voted for it to move forward, saying that the Board of Education have decided to make the following changes, right? So phase one is going to be the closure of Crocker, Escuellita, and Rice Community School and New Highland Academy. And then the following year, you have other schools that are going to be slated for closure. And like I said, some schools were removed, like Prescott Elementary School, and some are going into mergers. And in addition to that, like I said in the previous slide, these school closures in the list that you are seeing in front of you are here because from their perspective, these schools met the criteria for closure and or merger, right? So again, let me just point this out. We're not saying you should shut anyone down, but if you're willing to do what it takes to save some schools, which is struggling much more, essentially we should be willing to put the same effort to explain others, right? For example, some of the things that were amended during the meeting was the fact that Prescott was taken off of the list, right? If you can see here, let me just point a couple of things out, right? Prescott has historical enrollment of 183, right? In 2017, right? And then in 2017, projected all the way up to 2022, there's now at 107, right? So that then tells us that there's been like about 40% drop in historical enrollment, right? Also, we want to kind of point things out here in terms of the first time, twice time applicant here, right? There's 0, and then the demand rate is again low and at 38%. Utilization is about 48%, and then the SPED program is also decreasing in years. So we're not, like I said, we're not saying you should shut anyone down. We're just saying if you're willing to do what it takes to save Prescott, right, you should be willing to try to help others as well, or at least try to explain why one deserves so much more help than the other. And let me just make that point in terms of schools that are still on the closure list and presume or seem to essentially be doing much better than the schools slated for non-closure or removed from the closure list, right? So for example, here we have Carl Munck. Carl Munck, historical enrollment, you can see here at 239, right, in 2017. And then in 2022 to 2023, this projection is going to be at 200. So essentially there's like a 17% drop in enrollment, right, which is from what you saw earlier with Prescott is a lot less, right? 40 versus 17% here. And then another thing is that the SPED program at Carl Munck, again, is a lot greater, right? Increasing in years, which is the opposite of what's happening in Prescott. Utilization is a lot higher. It's at 100%. The first choice on-time applicants is going to be at 40%. And then in addition to that, the demand rate is increasing over time, right? It's at 71%, right? So it's the complete opposite. So we're just kind of trying to think about here in terms of the criteria that the OUSD is suggesting they're utilizing of what is staying or not staying on this list. But as you can see here, and I can make this point with other schools, not just Carl Munck, essentially suggesting that rationale doesn't, or that criteria doesn't make sense. There's contradictions in the criteria that they're essentially using, right? For example, again, here's Hillcrest, right? Hillcrest, you can see that historical enrollment is at 388, right? That is above the slated criteria for closure, right? Which is fewer than 300. And then now at projection enrollment of 365, right? So again, that's greater than the 300 that they said they were using as a criteria for what schools are going to be presented for closure, right? And then you can see that first choice on-time application is at 77, right? Greater than Carl B. That demand rate is at 82% and was higher previously. And then over time, you can see that that teacher retention is at 81%, which is, okay, it's not showing here, but also, the teacher retention at Carl Munck is at almost 80% as well. And utilization is at 147%. And then you can also see that the special ed program is increasing over time. And there's really this pipeline between Carl B and Hillcrest in terms of the special ed program. And so you can see that if there is a closure that happens next year for Carl B and Hillcrest, that transition and or that closure will be more felt because of the special ed classes that essentially are in these programs, right, for special ed education, right? And again, showing you this slide with Prescott that's in the OUSD report, right? That SPED program is not as big as compared to Carl Munck and Hillcrest, right? So this And then, just kind of making a case for La Escuellita, right? The historical enrollment is at 418, right? And then it's projected to 390, right? And so again, this idea of fewer than 300 miss this criteria, right? For La Escuelita, right? The special ed program is also high. The utilization is there. The first time choice is there. The retention rate is there for teachers in 1 year. So key point is, like I said, we're not saying you should shut down anyone, but if you're willing to do what it takes to say Prescott, which is struggling so much more, you should be willing to put the same effort to explain Carl Munck, Hillcrest, and La Escuelita, or at least explain why one deserves more help than the other. Right? Again, and then another thing that I haven't really mentioned, in which we should really be talking about, are that there are these affluent schools in the area that are not on the consolidation closure list, right? You have Montclair, Crocker, Highland, Cleveland, and Redwood Heights that are predominantly white or affluent students, right? And then if we look at the enrollment, right, here you have 360, right? La Escuelita beats that, and Hillcrest, right? And then you have Crocker Highland at enrollment at 458, and then Montclair is probably the highest here at this point, right? But all I'm saying is that, if there's really an issue of re-enrollment or enrollment here, the suggestion should probably be to try to close down one of these schools and redistribute their students to Colby or Hillcrest or these other schools. But the consideration for that is not even part of the resolution, right? In addition to that, one of the things that have not been kind of considered, or that's not part of the budget issues or the budget estimated for the OUSD, is that research essentially has shown that 1 in 8 students use bus to get to their schools, right? In California alone, it's been $1 billion utilized in transporting students, right? In addition to that, it's been proven, that there's a likelihood of bus usage increases with declining household income and increasing distance to school, right? So these schools that are going to all be shut down are all servicing low income communities, right? So that means that the district are going to have to figure out how to budget and how to pay for transportation so that kids can get to school, right? I mean, you could almost project that there's going to be an issue of enrollment, and not only that, but like retention and attendance, right? And so, it's clearly outlined here in this profile that majority of the schools being considered for closure are between 80 to 90% low income families, right? So, and then, like I said earlier, in this consideration of affluent schools that are not on the list closure, closing one school of affluent school and redistributing them sounds like a much better proposal here. Just because there won't be an issue of transportation, those parents are able to drive their kids to school. Low income is not a problem. There's just so many different benefits in terms of, or other ways that this budget gap could be solved. And if it's truly an enrollment issues, like I said, the enrollment, historical enrollment distribution here is already letting like those drop are not that significant, right? But if we look at Prescott, that drop is significant, right? But they're taken off the list, right? But then these last few schools that we're looking at, that drop is not that huge, right? But they're going to be closing. La Escuelita is going to close this year, right? Hillcrest and Colby is going to are slated for closure next year, right? So what is the real criteria that is happening, or what is the real criteria being utilized here? And why are some of these other schools in the area, especially Redwood Heights right next to Carl Munck, not slated for closure? And why are, if Carl Munck do close, why aren't Carl Munck students being merged, or why is Redwood Heights not a welcoming school, right? So these are just questions that I think are important to answer, and are these closure really what's best for the students that are going to be greatly impacted by these decisions, and essentially the decision that the board made in terms of how this closure are going to essentially happen in the next, this year and the following year.